The southern Spanish region of Andalucia comprises the cities of Malaga, Seville, Cordoba and Granada, and was the last outpost of Islamic Spain just over 500 years ago. The land area covers almost 1/5 of Spain, with a population of 8 million, and the regional capital is Seville. Lying on the Mediterranean Sea coastline, the region of Andalucia gets very hot and dry in the summer months of June to September, so the best time to visit is March to May, when it is warm and not too rainy. Most visitors head for the infamous Costa del Sol, west of Malaga. Actually, the coast to the east, which is known as the Costa Tropical, is much more beautiful with its turquoise water. Apart from the normal hotels, there are also secure, self-catering apartments which are ideal for families with children. The region is known for its food, with obvious Arab influences. Gazpacho is a cold tomato soup. Paella is a rice dish often made with seafood or chicken with a blend of herbs and spices. And tapas is a range of countertop snacks, often involving olives, vegetables, or small meat snacks. So let's take a look at some of the towns, starting with the coastal capital of Malaga. Malaga hosts the region's busiest airport and is a major port town itself. Established by the Phoenicians of Lebanon almost 3,000 years ago, the Muslims took control after 711. They began building a fort on the hill and a walled Medina city beneath it, encasing the port. The larger Gibralfaro castle was built by Yusuf I in the 14th century as a defence against the advancing Christian kings. The castle has a fantastic strategic location, with views in all directions and ramparts all around that you can walk along. Below us, you can see the bullring of Malaga, called the Plaza de Toros. Bullfighting is ingrained in the Spanish culture, even though it now seems barbaric to outsiders. It's estimated that every year, over 30 million Spaniards watch live fights, as 24,000 bulls are killed for sport. There is now a growing opposition, and recently both the Canary Islands and Barcelona outlawed the sport. However, in its home region, it's as popular as ever. To the right is the large port area.
Don't go too far, okay?
And further still is the Cathedral of Malaga, beyond the Alcazaba further down the hill. Here you can see the beautiful town hall called the Ayuntamiento. If the cathedral seems to lack a tower to its west, this is because the money that was intended for that tower was actually given to support the American War of Independence against Britain over 200 years ago. The Alcazaba was the residence of the emirs of Malaga, who had carved out a kingdom for themselves in the 11th century. It contains beautiful Moorish architecture, a mini Alhambra, but we'll visit the real thing later. Further in the distance, you can make out the Rosaleda Stadium of Malaga's football team, the most popular sport in Spain. Teams in Spain often get crowds of over 50,000, and teams such as Barcelona and Real Madrid to the north can attract over 100,000 to a single match. Within the compounds of the Gibralfaro castle are some very nice tropical gardens and steep paths that follow the hill down towards the Alcazaba. There are huge gates at the foot of the hill leading back up to the Alcazaba, but we decided to venture on into the city. On the way, this is the old Roman theatre, which is over 2,000 years old. Heading into town, here you can see signs for the many museums and attractions related to the prolific artist Pablo Picasso, who was born here in 1881 and went on to produce a staggering 13,500 paintings. Yes, that's the equivalent of one painting a day, every day for 40 years. Strolling past the cathedral, we get to the fashionable Marqués de Larios pedestrianised shopping area. All of the usual big name stores are here, but we'll see later the more interesting boutiques and craft shops of Cordoba. So we've visited Malaga. Now the next stop is the city of Granada, the last outpost of the Muslim rulers of Spain. The city is huge, but the main attraction is the Alhambra Palace. There are only 8,100 tickets issued daily, and most are pre-purchased. There can also be long queues at the tickets office on site, so be prepared and plan ahead. Granada was a small town with a large Jewish community until the Muslims of the Almohad dynasty were forced to flee south as the Christian reconquest of the 13th century gathered pace. One of the Nasrid princes, Ibn al-Ahmar, having fled south from Zaragoza, decided to build an independent kingdom here with a fortified city on the hilltop. So the Alhambra was born in 1240. The modern site has the gardens and Nasrid Palace, but also later palaces and churches, such as the Palace of Carlos V, which also now serves as a small museum. One of the highlights of the grounds is the Partal, which was a garden area next to a palace for the ladies of the royal court. The reflection of the building in the pool creates an amazing effect with the background of Granada and the Sierra Nevada mountains.
No, I'm not dubbing it out. I'm going to play that all around the world.
The original fort of the Alhambra is the Alcazaba, which has many lookout towers and defences that provide great views of the city. From here, you start to understand why the rulers decided to set up a citadel here.
Can I say gracias to him for letting me come today? Can I say gracias?
On the opposite hill, you can see the traditional style of the houses as they hug the steep incline. Within the Alcazaba compound is a maze, and in the background are the magnificent snow-capped Sierra Nevada mountains. The real treasure of the Alhambra is the Narrated Palace, where the royal family lived and entertained guests and dignitaries. Here the decoration reaches new heights, which are seldom seen outside of places like Morocco. There is intricate tile work, Arabic inscriptions, and carved wooden ceilings. There are two courtyards, with the changing scenes around the water pools are the central feature. You have to book in advance to get in to see this Narrated Palace, and are allocated a half-hour time slot. During the peak of summer, you should book well in advance to avoid disappointment. Cooling down back on the Costa Tropical near Almunica, the next city to visit is the centrepiece of Andalucia, Seville. Seville is the capital city of Andalucia. Its central area is around the Guadalquivir River, the original Arabic name being Wadi al-Kabir, and there are many classical buildings on either bank of the river. Let's start with the Plaza de España, which sits on a corner of the Maria Luisa Park. The plaza is actually a legacy of the Ibero-American Expo held here in 1929 to celebrate the extent of the Spanish influence across the world. The Plaza de España was built by the architect Aníbal González. There's a waterfall in the centre, and then the plaza building fans out in a semicircle around it. There's a waterway which in the summer is used for boating, and several beautifully decorated bridges span the waterway. Near to the park is the cathedral and the Giralda Tower. The cathedral is claimed to be the largest in Europe, built in 1401 on the site of the Almohad Juma Mosque. Inside, this tomb is dedicated to the explorer Christopher Columbus, who set sail from Seville over 500 years ago to discover the Americas. Next to the cathedral is an open courtyard called the Patio de los Naranjos, which was originally the ablution area of the Great Mosque. And rising up in the background is the Giralda Tower, originally the towering minaret of the mosque. The Giralda was later converted into a bell tower. Visitors can climb up the Giralda, and although it takes 15 minutes to get to the top and seems very, very tall, the walk is actually up a series of around 40 ramps rather than hundreds of steps, and there are plenty of places along the way to stop and take a look at the view out of the windows. From the bell tower level, you can see the various classical and brightly painted buildings of the Santa Cruz area. Santa Cruz is the most expensive part of the city. Other areas such as Santa Catalina, San Pedro and Triana are more affordable. Locals always tell you to be wary of petty theft from cars or snatched bags, but the city is not as intimidating as they suggest. In the distance you can see the Alcazar Palace, built in the Moorish style, but actually after the Muslims and Jews had been expelled. Straddling the river Guadalquivir is the golden tower known as the Torre del Oro. In Muslim times, the tower formed part of the walled defences and lookout of the city. Around the year 1200, there was a similar tower on the other side of the river, and a gold chain used to be hung between them to prevent enemy ships from sailing into Seville at night. The last stop is the once great city of Cordoba. The city has one main attraction, and that's the old mosque known as La Mezquita, Masjid, and the walled Medina that surrounds it. Walking towards the mosque, the side streets are very atmospheric, and you can take in the ornate gates to the structure. The courtyard contains many orange trees and fountains, and this is where Muslims used to perform ablutions before prayers, just as we saw previously in Seville. The mosque itself has a distinctive interior with those recognisable red and white stone horseshoe arches that run along the inside. There's a cool and calm atmosphere right up until you get to the cathedral that was bashed into the structure after the Muslims were evicted. And this seems out of place and spoils the modest atmosphere of the rest of the structure. The main mosque was built in 4 stages to accommodate the growing congregation as the population of Cordoba swelled to almost 1 million. And that was 1,000 years ago. The climate of cooperation at the time meant that Muslims, Christians and Jews were all able to worship within the same building. And the cooperation extended to culture and science, as Cordoba became a beacon of culture and learning for the whole world. Around the mosque are the narrow and winding streets of the Medina. There are many craft shops selling leather goods, paintings and other visitor favourites. You can imagine that 1,000 years ago this would have been a bustling bazaar and souk, just as you still find across the Middle East. And the narrow lanes would have been built by the Arabs to create shade and a breeze during the hot summers when temperatures were often close to 50 degrees centigrade. Heading out of the Juderia district, some of the old city walls are still standing. Many of the great philosophers and thinkers of that age, such as Ibn Rushd and Maimonides, are commemorated by statues in Cordoba. A few kilometers outside of Cordoba, as the land turns to fields, you come across Medina Zahra, which was built as a palace complex around 1,000 years ago by the Caliph Abdurrahman III, who apparently named it after his wife, Zahra. Only the skeleton remains of the complex, but you still get a sense of how magnificent it would have been in its heyday. So the region of Andalucia has a lot to offer and has many hidden gems of Muslim history in the least likely villages. Its climate makes it easy to visit all year round. And most importantly, it's very family oriented and children are welcomed everywhere. We hope that you've enjoyed this brief tour of the southern Spanish region of Andalucia. Join us again for Travel and History on MTA.